All right, good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, or is it good evening, good afternoon? What time is it? Yes, yes. All right, well, thank you all for coming, and thank you our speakers for being here. They had to drive all the way to South Bend, all the way from Chicago. It was a long drive, but they are here. And Caroline Capilli, who was going to moderate our panel today, she landed in Chicago this morning, but she ended up in a ER. So unfortunately, she was not able to make it today. She's still in the hospital. Hopefully she'll get better and she'll be here for the banquet. So yeah, I'll be moderating the panel instead. So without further ado, I guess we can get started right away. Before we start with the questions, I'll be briefly introducing our speakers one by one. So here we have Sang Lee. He's graduated back in 2009, and he is currently the Director of Development at the Chicago Bar Foundation, and he has also worked at the Public Interest Law Initiative and the Progressive Law Group. And as part of his community work, he also serves as president-elect of the National Conference of Bar Foundation, and formerly he served as president of the Asian American Bar Association of Greater Chicago. Thank you for being here, Sang. And to his left, we have Karen joining us, and Karen graduated back in 2005, and she is currently a principal attorney at Zulkie Partners. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Okay, Zulkie Partners. And she advises companies on immigration compliance. And since 2018, she's been selected as a leading lawyer in Illinois. And Karen has also worked at the National Immigrant Justice Center and also at the Notre Dame's Immigration Clinic. And she is also an avid runner. And she was recently invited to run the Berlin Marathon just after completing the Chicago and New York City marathons. And to her left, we have Jobil joining us, and Jobil is currently a director and head of data use and privacy for RWE Clean Energy, and before his role at the RWE CE, he served as a Deputy Attorney General for New Jersey and as an Associate General Counsel for Privacy at Meta. And finally, we have Madhavi joining us. Madhavi, she graduated most recently, right? She graduated back in 2017. She is currently a privacy counsel at CrowdStrike, and she was formerly corporate counsel for HubSpot. And prior to her in-house work, she also focused on commercial litigation, class actions, and data privacy in Chicago. Okay, we'll get started right away. So how this works is I have a list of pre-selected questions that we got from you guys, the questions that you wanted to ask our speakers. So I'll be asking each question at a time, and each speaker will take turn answering question, and maybe for like an hour, maybe for like a minute or two, not an hour.
We can do an hour if you really want to.
Is it billable? That's a good question.
It is
right?
billable.
Yeah.
It is billable. It is going to be coming out of our funds. Okay. So the first question we have is, how have you utilized APALSA's alumni network? And also, what memorable experiences do you have from your time here at Notre Dame and with your involvement in APALSA? So maybe we can start with Sang.
Hi everyone, Madhavi. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. So when I was in law school, the way I used alumni network.
Question.
To be an expert for Judge Mary Yu, who was in Boston Superior Court at the time. She is now a Supreme Court Justice in Washington, American for herself. I'm really thankful for having the experience. She's an alum from Notre Dame. And then I think what's your next question around APALSA?
What memorable experiences do you have from your time here at Notre Dame and also your involvement in APALSA?
So when it was called ALSA when I was in law school. I was a president of ALSA, so I enjoy like meeting with other Asian law students. And I can tell you, so like when I was growing up in Seattle, there were a lot of Asian Americans coming to Notre Dame. It's like, oh, there aren't that many of us here. So it was like nice having community with people. When I was back in high school, it didn't really occur to me that I'm part of the Asian crowd, because I was just hanging out with everyone else. But here it was like having that sort of shared lived experience and shared need to go, let's go eat. We gotta find somewhere where we can eat kimchi or something. You know, that was I enjoyed that having that community through ALSA.
Cool. Yeah. So can you guys hear me? Okay. Yeah. So in terms of the use of the APALSA Alumni Network, I just want to be transparent. I actually didn't take advantage of it, which I probably should have. And I know the current APALSA group is really trying to capitalize on the network, which I think is great for you guys. But I definitely have memorable experiences from being part of APALSA when I was in law school. So I graduated in 2005, so that's 20 years ago. So I'm kind of the old person. So I don't know how the South Bend food community is now, but back 20 years ago, it was not great. I was sharing with some of the 2Ls that there's this Laotian place where they served for rice, minute rice. And there's a Korean place where you had to pay for the panchan, and all my Korean friends were just scandalized by that. So it was just difficult to find some good food. But so what I remember is APALSA, we would just get together and just eat. And just that simple act of eating together was great for encouraging us, keeping us going when we kind of felt like the other. I remember I had these 2 Filipino classmates, our 1L year. They decided to host this party, and we were also low budget. You're a poor grad student. And so they decided to buy the low-end chocolate. You might be able to guess the brand. And they were hoping that no one would be able to guess what that brand was. And they dipped the strawberries in the chocolate. But of course, I knew what it was. It was Hershey's. And they were like devastated. But we all had a good laugh about it because it was the best we could do. And so I think just the food events just were fun. And I remember another time, since my husband worked in Chicago, he could get the Asian ingredients. So he one time made chicken satay, and that was like everyone's like meal for the weekend because there weren't other good options. So I think the food, that was a big deal.
That is Jobil.
Yeah, can you guys hear me? Honestly, in all sincerity, I don't think I would have survived my first year without a lot of my friends that I made during my first year. And it just happened to be, Asian Pacific Islander friends. I keep in touch with a lot of them to this day. And so it was also at that time as well. I think I went into law school not really knowing anything about law. I didn't have any lawyers in the family. I didn't have any friends who were lawyers. There weren't any Indian people who were lawyers at that time. And so I went in and I'm just like, okay, reading my books, right? Went to the undergrad library. I got some supplements. I'm like, piece of cake, it's like undergrad. And then like I got torpedoed my first semester. I'm like, oh gosh, and I was telling someone, I called my parents. I'm like, I don't think I could do this, Mom and Dad. And a lot of my friends at that point, in particular, they reached out and we're talking and we're like, you know what? Hey, Jobil, hey, let's just study together. We're there's this thing called, supplements. I'm like, what is these supplements? There's things called outline, and they put me in touch with, individuals who are 2Ls and 3Ls. Like, okay, well, this is their outline, so you obviously got to read, but you got to, also understand what the topics are. So it was really helpful. I'm really appreciative of the community. So, I'm really ecstatic to be here and talking to you guys. A lot more people now than at that time. So.
Yeah, so my experience actually is somewhat reminiscent of Karen and Jobil's, where I didn't really take advantage of the ALSA community, because when I was here, it was also called ALSA, until my 3rd year, when I actually had time to, or I felt like I had time to be social. And so similar to Karen, I there was like one lunch that was organized by ALSA at India Garden, I think. And I was like, yes, I go there anyway for the all-you-can-eat lunch buffets. And so we went, and it was like my first time actually meeting some of the other upperclassmen, or like some of the alums and some of my fellow upperclassmen in a social setting. And I learned from that lunch, I think I went to like one lunch, and I learned at that lunch that a lot of my future colleagues were there, and they were going to be in Chicago. And so I felt like, oh, this is great. Like, I should keep in touch with these people, and I did. And some of them are some of my mentors now in Chicago, and they've actually introduced me to local affinity groups in Chicago. So, and I've had the opportunity to take advantage of the local Chicago attorney affinity groups, like the South Asian Bar Association of Chicago, and the Asian American Bar Association of Chicago, which I had no idea existed when I was in law school. So it's really cool now that I'm reflecting on my experience here, how I wish that I'd gotten involved with ALSA in a more meaningful way during my first year, because I think I would have maybe had an experience similar to Jobil, where I would have felt less alone. And because law school itself can be somewhat of an isolating experience, especially when you're one of like 2 or 3 law students of color in a class that doesn't necessarily look like you.
So the second question we have is, why did you decide to pursue a legal career? And were there any cultural or societal influences that were involved in that choice?
Oh, should I go first? Okay. So I immigrated here from South Korea when I was 7 years old. And I think it's like a sort of an East Asian parent's dream to have a doctor and a lawyer, in the family. So my brother was going to be the doctor, so I guess that means I'm going to be the lawyer. So I wanted to choose my own path. So for a year between college and law school, I did an AmeriCorps program, and I was a paralegal for public defenders. And I learned 2 things: that I never want to be a public defender, but I could practice law, and I could make a real big difference. And that's why I went into law school. I wanted to change the world and spend my whole life doing that. It's like part of the reason I went to Notre Dame. So I'm a double dormer undergrad and law school. Is that part of my faith is that I stand with the poor and the oppressed, and that's what it means to live my values by giving back and serving the community. So that's why I've spent my career doing.
Yeah, so for me, I grew up in Massachusetts, and at the time it was a pretty homogenous community. I probably was one of the few Asians, just like me and my twin sister, and then there's a Chinese kid, and they thought that we for sure were going to get married someday, that type of situation. And I just remember in kindergarten, first grade, I can still remember the faces and names of the kids who threw racial slurs at me. And I also saw what my parents experienced. And my dad, he had like a PhD and was super smart, but people didn't respect him because he didn't look right or didn't speak correctly. And so that definitely made me sort of angry, and I think really set the foundation for me to sort of want to see justice, whatever that meant for an elementary school kid. And then, of course, fast forward to junior high, and you're reading in English class To Kill a Mockingbird. And I really identified with Atticus Finch, whatever that meant, this Southern guy, but he was standing up for someone who didn't really have a voice or had a voice that wasn't heard. And then, in high school, you take AP US history and you learn about the civil rights movement. And so I kind of was like, I want to be an Atticus Finch and, basically speak up for those who don't have a voice. And yeah, like saying, I think part of my faith is a big foundation for that too. And I still remember in English class reading MLK's letter, I think from Birmingham jail, when he actually quotes, let justice roll down like rivers and righteous like ever flowing stream. And I was like, yeah, I'm totally signed up for that. And even though I'm not like a civil litigator, I'm not an Atticus Finch, I do practice in the immigration law sphere. And, a lot of my clients, it's like a dual representation situation where it's US companies, but then also the employees they hire, which could be executives or international students. And you'd be surprised, a lot of these folks who are highly educated, very successful, they get concerned about their voices being heard and seen, especially in this current environment. And so I feel like I can sort of advocate for them. And so, yeah, that's why I'm in law.
For me, I think it was, Karen talked about language. So when I was born, my mom had fallen down a flight of stairs. And so she wasn't able to work. We came from my parents were in America for like 4 years, so then they didn't have much money. So what they did was they sent me to India from ages 1 to 4, right? So when it's time for me to go back to school, preschool and kindergarten, I came back, from the farm, which is what my grandparents did. I came back, and then my parents, when I started school, I really couldn't speak. I developed a stuttering problem, right? And they didn't really know how to diagnose it. So they put me in, special ed classes. I almost failed first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade. So, and then what I realized was, I was like, hey, I used to pray and be like, okay, like, why are you doing this to me, God? Like, what did I do? And so the furthest thing that I thought I could ever do was become a lawyer, right? I'm seeing TV and they're like, this person arguing. So in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, this is something that was aspirational that I never thought I could do. And so, I just made a decision to try it and see what happens. And, 30, 40 years later, I'm here and I'm, practicing lawyer. Ironically, I ended up becoming a litigator. If you talk to my classmates, I wasn't the most articulate person. I joke around a lot. But I went to the AG's office. They put you where they put you, and that was as a litigator. And I did a pretty good job realizing what my strengths, realizing what my weaknesses are. It really helped having a stuttering problem at that time because before I said anything, I would think, which apparently is really good if you're a litigator. So that's how I kind of got and became a lawyer.
For me, it was a combination of factors that led me to eventually commit or sort of fall in and commit to the law. So my dad actually really encouraged me, I think, since I was fairly young to pursue law. I think he'd always had a dream, like his own dream of becoming an attorney or eventually going into government service. So I think when I slowly was like coming of age and I started sort of questioning him or like debating him on things, and he'd get a little irritated, as dads do. He would say, you're actually, like, he'd never say you're making good points. He would just say, you argue a lot. I think you could be a good lawyer, which is kind of like the stereotype, right? So I think that's kind of where it started, was just in that messaging that, you should continue to I should continue to build on my speaking skills, my writing skills. My mom also encouraged me to read a lot and to think about social justice issues. We grew up, my brothers and I grew up in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, which is governed by Sharia law. So we grew up around a lot of oppression of like the other, so to speak, and we were never really part of the majority ever. So I think there was that factored in as well to maybe my desire to be an advocate for equality and social justice and equal rights. And then later on, after college, I started thinking a little more seriously about whether I had what it took to be an attorney, because similar to Jobil, I didn't have any attorneys in my immediate family, and certainly attorneys who didn't qualify here in the US. So I figured that my path would be a little different, or maybe my family wouldn't fully understand, and because I didn't fully understand what it took to be an attorney here. So I worked for a couple of attorneys before coming to Notre Dame. I worked for a fair housing nonprofit that was led by a fierce attorney who was also a woman of color who graduated from Cornell, and she was like my idol. I was like, I want to grow up and be just like you, because she was doing really important work in building awareness around the Fair Housing Act and rules to help prevent housing discrimination in a city, in a small town in Ohio that had a lot of housing discrimination, and was fairly pervasive. And then I thought about corporate law because there was the money-hungry part of me that wanted to make money as well. And so I worked for a big law firm before coming to Notre Dame. And I worked for another fierce minority attorney woman who had her own litigation practice. And I learned from her what it sort of took day to day to manage a caseload, to understand what a docket was, to see cases in court. And so I felt very prepared through those experiences to both have the discipline to be an attorney and also like the passion and the motivation to help others to some degree, while also building a living myself.
Thank you for sharing all that. Now we'll be moving on to talk about some of the topics that might be a little more sensitive than what we just were talking about, which is the trends in the legal field these days and also the AAPI representation. So a 2021 study analyzed the bamboo ceiling, which is a term used to describe the barriers that Asian Americans face when trying to advance their careers. 65% of AAPI professionals described it as a moderate to serious problem. And so the question is, have you personally encountered or observed that ceiling in your career?
Yes, sure, I can start. So I'll give two perspectives, like me personally and sort of my role with the Asian American Bar Association. So in my personal work, I don't know if I really faced the bamboo ceiling directly. Some of it was self-imposed. I don't think I really believed in myself the way I should have, and I tended to have a tendency to just if I made a mistake, then I'll do whatever it takes to fix it, put my head down, and try to I can work all night. I'll just fix it so nobody knows. Or if someone needs help, I will do everything I can to help. I don't need to be in the limelight. I'll just be there for everyone. And so I kept killed myself with the work. And then I didn't really realize at the time, it's good to work hard, but it's also important to take time, on one hand self-care, but also being out in the community and getting to know people and networking and understanding that there is more to being an attorney than just working really hard at your craft. With my role with the Asian American Bar Association, so we've actually had some discussions around, there was NAPABA, Portrait of Asian Americans in Law, a follow-up study, and we gave a presentation to a couple hundred people, sort of showing that, so it was a follow-up study after many years later that showed that there were still the same problems that we were facing then. Especially in the law firm world, the ratio of partners to associates of all minority groups, we have the worst ratio. That hasn't changed, even though we've raised awareness of the issue. There's been a lot of training and advocacy around it, but we're still seeing it. In other areas, we saw some improvement. So when I first got involved with the Asian American Bar Association in 2019, our president at the time had sent a letter to the editor, how can there be no Asian American candidates for judge on the short list? There's a lot of great Asian Americans who want to be judge, who are trying, but there's no one. We had one of the lowest ratios of all groups in terms of judges versus the Asian American population. That has changed a lot. We've seen a lot of change. I've had to organize many parties for new judges, so maybe we could combine your parties now because there's a lot of you. But it was a big deal. Whenever we got a new Asian American judge, it was a big deal for our community. So that we're seeing some change there. We saw some change at the in-house level as well. A lot more Asian Americans are getting involved at the corporate legal department levels. But we still need to do a lot of work in the law firm world, hitting sort of that bamboo ceiling too, and would love to see more partners for Asian Americans represented.
Yeah, so I think I'll probably give a more microscopic view, yeah, because I don't really have the broad view and the stats, but I'll start with my own personal experience and then maybe give two stories of friends. So I think I have a very unique experience in terms of, I guess, not really having to deal with the bamboo ceiling. I think it's one, my practice area, so I'm in business immigration, and I think the stat is like 50% of us are female, and when I go to the conferences, it's pretty diverse. So that I think helps or has helped me. Second, I'm at a boutique firm. So I think what that means is that, we're not big firm, we're smaller. And I think it's harder just to throw a stereotype on someone that you kind of get to know pretty closely. So I think the partners, there weren't a ton of us. So they can't just be like, oh, that's Karen, the docile, subservient Asian female that we think she'll be. They got to know me. And then third, the senior partner, the guy who founded the firm, he's pretty much a bottom line guy. I don't know if it's because he kind of grew up blue collar and had to really pull himself up by his own bootstraps, but he pretty much was like, just bill and make the clients happy. And if you do that, you will just be in the lockstep plan I have for you to be partner. He was just pretty black and white that way, which is frankly pretty refreshing. But I think that kind of helped me. So when I had my first maternity leave, one of our largest clients, the in-house counsel said to him, hey, Paul, when is Karen coming back? And Paul, that just made him happy. He's just like, that's all I care about. I don't care how you look. So I think that's my experience, but I think it's very unique for those three factors. But I'll tell you a couple stories. But then also, sort of the bad news, but also maybe possible redemption. So I have a friend who graduated at the top of her class. From law school. I think some law schools have a special society for the people who are like super smart, and she was one of those people, very smart, worked in big law and was at this major law firm for quite some time, was expected to be partner, smart, hardworking. But then when it was time to become partner, they said, hey, you're not partner material and we're not gonna fire you, but we're not gonna give you any new work. So it was like constructive firing. But in the meantime, there's this white male associate 5 years behind her who had not been there as long, who was on partner track. And it was so confusing because it was like, I came here before him, but the thing is, the senior partner of the department was a white male. And, it just maybe people like people who look like them. And it was really hard. I remember having hard conversations with her during lunch about this. But she landed on her feet. She's now in-house, doing really well. But yeah, it was hard. And I think it did not help that the two senior partners, one was a white female, the other was a white male, they just didn't see her. And it was interesting because she was telling about this article that said people don't leave their firms, they leave their bosses. And I think that's what happened because she had great relationships with other partners and other departments at this major law firm, but they weren't her boss, so it just wasn't gonna work out. But then I had this other friend who, also Asian female, worked in big law, and that her boss, white female, moved in-house to a major financial institution, household name, and she went with her boss. And, Asians can be kind of self-effacing. And my friend, very smart, but she put down in her performance review for meeting expectations. And her boss, this white female, said, no, you're gonna redo this because you far exceed expectations. I want you to write this performance review as if you're writing it for a friend because this, you are so much better than this. And now my friend, she's done very well. She's in-house somewhere doing very well. But I think the difference in those two scenarios, at least for these two friends of mine, I think one had an advocate and one did not. And I don't know, we'll probably talk about this later on, but those are just, so I guess the point being, it is out there. And I think it's really important to have someone who can see you, someone who's higher above you and who can advocate for you.
I would say absolutely. That's just my personal opinion. I think the fact that Asian and male does impact what happens. On top of it, obviously, color. I'm a darker male. And so I do think it impacts. If you look at kind of my career path, I don't know if everyone's seen the championship game where the first drive, it's kind of very similar to my career where I'm just like grinding it out all these places. And what I realized was that, if you're not like if you're not respected or not being promoted at one place, you know what? There is somebody who will respect you and promote you elsewhere. And you know, and all the criticism about Meta and WhatsApp, et cetera, you know, I found that to be the most diverse place I've ever worked at. You know, wonderful to Asian Pacific Islanders. You know, I felt at home. You know, so I can only give you what my personal opinion is. And then also, you know, if you know you're not going to get the same opportunities, again, based on my time and generation, you know what? Be ready for that opportunity, right? I think that's it. You know, when chance favors a prepared person. So when that opportunity comes, you got to be able to make that call, right? I think there's a tendency to be overly loyal, but why are you loyal to someone who's not loyal to you, right? And so I think that's the things I would take away. It's like, you know what, and don't get down on yourself about this or that. You know, there is an opportunity for you. It'll come. Be ready for it, right? And capitalize.
Yeah, I tend to agree with everyone here. There definitely is I'd say a bamboo ceiling that exists. And at least when I entered the profession in 2017, 2018, I was fortunate enough to have joined a firm where they actively talked about this. So they talked about the fact that, oh, you are like one of a handful of attorneys coming into like mid-sized private practice, and there's a presumption sort of against you. So it's kind of a scary thing to hear when you've been type A your whole life and you've gotten A's your whole life, to hear that, oh, you might actually not get an A, or you might not get a gold star, even if you work as hard or harder or longer than your colleagues. And so I think similar to some of the friends that Karen referenced, I've had friends as well who were overlooked for promotions and left private practice to candidly make more money, have better work-life balance. But for the longest time, even in my own career, my dream was to be a law firm partner. I wanted to be a litigation partner. I saw myself there, and then there were some, I'd say like microaggressions that I encountered, or just like passive comments where like people couldn't say my name right, people were confused about what I was doing there, some people thought that I was the assistant or the secretary. And so I felt like, okay, there's kind of like, I kind of had to fight that quite a bit starting out in my career. While I noticed that some of my other colleagues who also went to very good law schools didn't necessarily face that. And I struggled with finding allies and with building a group of folks who would really advocate for me enough, or teach me candidly, like, what's the checklist that I have to meet in order to become a litigation partner. So it does exist. I think to Karen's point, finding allies early on when you're starting your career is critical, regardless of what your aspirations are, regardless of whether you change your career trajectory in the next like 4 or 5 years. It's important to have people in your corner who will give it to you straight and give you critical feedback to help you grow. And you have to be open to that feedback and ready to pivot and adapt. I would also say that, to Sang's point, like advocating for yourself is critically important, and overcoming your own, any sort of insecurities that you feel because you see attorneys who maybe are more articulate than you are, or maybe have thought through an argument more, or maybe have uncles and aunts who are friends with judges and you might not have those connections, right? I think is critically important. I had to keep telling myself, I think when I started my career, that I went to Notre Dame and I got into Notre Dame and I'm a highly qualified attorney. No matter what anyone tells me, I'm highly qualified. And so I would say like your own inner monologue is critically important to overcome sort of the perceptions that people will have of you, or the mistaken assumptions that people will have of you. So don't let, all this to say, like, don't let the bamboo ceiling scare you from crushing your career, because all of you are very qualified and will crush your careers.
Could I comment on that? I mean, so when I was president of ABA, I've had to talk with people who were running for a judge that they're being too humble. So it's not just like you had, like, they're the most amazing people. It's like I know like what you've done. Like, please, like, so I would like edit their letters so that we could submit it when they're like running for a judge, because it just was like, let me advocate for you, because we have sometimes have such a struggle in advocating for ourselves. So it's so important to like have someone that you can like talk with, that you trust, who can sort of like help be your champion, because sometimes we're not always the best at being our own champions. And then obviously it's important for you to be that for other people. And it could be someone who's done amazing work, like even US law students, like can really do a lot for us who are practicing, to help lift us up too as well.
Thank you. So building on this idea of advocacy in the workplace for yourself, one question that is related to that point is, do you see generational differences in how Asian Americans lawyers approach issues of identity and advocacy in the workplace? And if so, how might these differences shape the future of AAPI leadership in the legal field?
Oh, sorry. I keep forgetting that. Like, I start to make to repeat the question.
Yes. So, do you see generational differences in how Asian American lawyers approach issues of advocacy in the workplace?
I see a little bit. I mean, just from my interactions with younger attorneys, I feel like they are more, they understand social issues better. They're more social justice minded than some of the Asian American like partners that I've built relationships with. And like I think, well, a lot of the ones who sort of made it as partners, like they're very savvy and understand how the systems work. I think they try to like educate the younger attorneys, but sometimes there's sort of a gap in like, you know, what is valued, and sometimes that causes some strife between the two generations.
Yeah, I would say from what I've observed, I do think the younger generation is a bit more vocal and a bit more willing to kind of maybe put themselves out there. You know, I just to give you a story, you know, I know this one, she's Korean American, and she specifically told me, Karen, I literally fight every stereotype around being an Asian female. And she really does. She used to wear this shirt around the firm that says, I'm trouble, you know? And she would just, when she was a young associate, she would just speak back to the white female partner. Mm-hmm. That was different. But she said, because she knows her default MO is to be, you know, kind of deferential. And she's like, no, I'm gonna fight it. And she does. And I'm always impressed by that. And I think, you know, that type of attitude, if you have enough of that, I think it could bring change, because voices get heard and there's pushback. And definitely, you know, my observations between her and this one partner, it definitely helped the partner kind of back down, because that partner is kind of known to be a little more, you know, out there. So, yeah, so that's what I've observed.
Yeah, I think it's changed quite a bit. You know, when I decided to go to law school, I told my parents, and my parents, this is like 2002, and my parents were like, "You're being a lawyer?" And my mom with her accent was like, "Oh, you're being a liar." And I'm like, "I'm a lawyer." Like, and then she's like, you know, because you know where you know back in India, the rule of law was a little more lax. Let's put it that way. And you got you know, you got to be a doctor, you got to be an engineer, and a lawyer in India. And so they're like, well, what are you doing? And so they weren't really, you know, really supportive, and maybe because 20 years ago wasn't, you know, as you know, they didn't realize what a lawyer in the United States is. And then, ironically, I took a job as clerking And I told them my salary that I'm going to be taking, which is probably half of what you guys are paying for tuition per year. And my mom, mind you, this is like a week after I graduated, and she's like, Jobil, it's not too late to become a doctor. I'm like, Mom, I just finished law school, these exams. So I think it's changed, right? I think you guys are in a little bit better position. I think at least in the Asian American communities. So I did. Sorry, if you're recording this, Mom, I'm sorry.
Sorry, could you repeat the question again?
Yes. Do you see generational differences in how Asian American lawyers approach issues of identity and advocacy in the workplace?
Yeah, I think in echoing some of the earlier comments, I think being like maybe, I'm not quite like the younger, like part of the newer generation of attorneys, but I'm kind of maybe somewhere in the middle now. I do see a contrast between more, I'd say like more senior partners who, especially like equity level partners who I've worked with, who are Asian American. I've seen how sort of some of the, maybe trauma is too strong of a word, but I'm seeing like how they approach the practice still as though it is like back in the old days, right? Where you have to talk about like kind of the stereotypical topics like football, basketball, even if that's not like authentic to you. I think with the newer generation and even with my generation of attorneys, I think there is more of a push towards being authentic and with embracing your Asianness, if that makes sense, or talking about it more openly. So I saw this most notably at my prior role before CrowdStrike. I was at a company called HubSpot, whose CEO is an Indian woman from, I think she's from Bangalore, and she's brilliant. And even the chief product officer is an Indian man. And so they like normalize celebrating Hindu holidays like Diwali. So for the first time ever in my career when I was at HubSpot, I took Diwali off and it was accepted and nobody cared and nobody questioned what is Diwali because the CEO and the chief product officer talked about it. And like all of the engineers at the company were, or the majority of them were based in India. So it was just presumed that everyone would take that day off. And so I think because there are Asian Americans within executive leadership, I think that's helped, and they're more visible at larger companies. I think that's helped sort of normalize and actually make being Asian American or of the same race as those people kind of cool and almost like a selling point. So I've seen in my generation and even in the younger generation of attorneys, more of an openness towards embracing that and not sort of shying away from it, while I've seen more senior attorneys struggle a little bit with that because it's sort of seems to be like a newer trend. And I love it. I love that there's a push towards fully embracing and bringing out that side of you and your practice, because it is a critical component of who I am, and I can't like divorce myself from my Asian identity. So I love that that's sort of the trend.
Thank you. So talking about the leadership, all of you are currently or have been involved in leadership roles of some kind. And how has your cultural background influenced your leadership style and approach to law?
So for me, I really like being invested in people and seeing them grow to become sort of like the best that they can be. So that's how, like, especially with when I was part of the Asian American Bar Association, like being understanding and seeing them as their authentic selves, and whatever their strengths are, putting their energy there. I remember and like having gone through sort of my own sort of issues in the legal world, like I feel like that also has taught me to be more compassionate with people. So to give one example, there was a person on my board who just suddenly just was not very active. After I was trying to reach out and see what's going on, and he was like ready to sort of drop off the board. He was very apologetic, and then after sort of like talking through with him, it was like, oh, like a family member died. It's like, oh, it's like, and he felt like embarrassed about talking about it. And then so after getting to know him and giving him some time and grace to figure that out, he came back stronger than ever. And like he's my successor as president, and he's doing an incredible job. And just like, knowing and taking time to, like it's okay that it's not even a mistake, you just needed time. And that allowed him to be more of himself and be a great leader himself.
Yeah, so I'll first start in terms of talking about how it's affected my leadership, and then second, my view of the law. So one thing I think that a lot of Asians value is community. We really put the group first above the individual, and I think that definitely has affected my leadership style. I think as a partner, sometimes some partners just feel like, I'm the partner of the client. I know what's best. I'm just going to make a decision. But I really feel like it's important to get input from the team. So I'll even ask not just associates, but the paralegals, hey, this is what's going on with the client. These are my thoughts, but I want to hear what you have to say. And it's not to say that I'm going to do exactly what they tell me they think should be done, because there'll be different opinions, but it's all facts that inform my decision making. And oftentimes, it's absolutely critical because I have my blind spots and they're able to see things I don't. So I definitely think this Asian value for community, affects how I lead. Instead of just sort of making my own decision, I like to sort of gather facts. And then as it relates to approach to law, so, Asians, we tend to be very much respectful to authority. And for me, as an attorney, when you swear, that oath, you're swearing to uphold the law, right? And so for me, that's like the authority, like the law. And so I definitely am very compliance oriented. And sometimes, depending on the corporate culture of the client, they love that. And others, I had one individual, this in-house counsel, she's white. She, we parted ways because we're in different, perspectives. But she literally, I remember being on a phone call with her, and we were talking about an issue related to, just to give you some really general details, but essentially the company had acquired another company. And when we were looking at the files of this company that acquired, there had been some misrepresentation. And so we were telling them, you guys need to correct this. But for her, it's because you want to be compliant. But she said, Karen, this is where you and I are different. You start with compliance, I start with what the business needs. And she said, I know for sure there are many areas where we're not compliant, but I'm okay with that as long as it doesn't blow up the business. As long as it's only $50,000 in fines, I'm okay with that, And so that was definitely a different philosophy. And so we basically had to say, yeah, we're not for each other. We're going to break up, But yeah, so that's sort of how I think my Asian value for authority has affected my approach to law.
I would say, be in the relationship business, right? You could always learn the laws, right? There weren't any laws on really privacy. There weren't any laws on AI. You could learn the laws, but be in the relationship business with people. The thing I would say for this group over here as a challenge is what? Network with each other and make a commitment to build that network right when you leave this place. I think, all the successes in my life have come through relationships. Somebody who goes on a limb and say, hey, I work with Jobil, he's awesome, right? And so that is as valuable, obviously pass your tests, do well, but that is as valuable. And for whatever reason, it is almost like pulling teeth, whether you're South Indian, whether you're, Asian Pacific Islander. It's like difficult. So just try to build that relationship. Some of the relationship, I had a judge who was a Latino judge, and he went out and helped me out. It doesn't have to be Asian, but build that relationship, because relationships matter more than the X's and Y's of law. I mean, that's my personal opinion. All right, you could be the smartest person, but if nobody likes you, right, they're not going to go to you, or they may not work with you, or they may not want to sit on a plane ride for 6 hours with you. So I think that's really important as far as practice in life and practice in law school.
Yeah, so in terms of how has my cultural background influenced my approach to the practice of law and my leadership style. So I grew up abroad. So I spent most of my pre-college life abroad. So I think I mentioned I grew up in Saudi Arabia, and I also spent my high school years in India, and I went to international schools. So I've grown up around diversity, like extreme diversity. And so my approach, that whole experience, and I'd highly encourage everybody to live abroad and to go abroad as much as you can, because it gives you a lot of perspective on life and how to relate to people who aren't like you. So that experience actually has shaped not just who I am as a person, but also my approach to practicing, especially with people who don't look like me. I think within my legal department, I'm one of maybe 2 South Asian people out of a group of like 80 attorneys. So I've always been the foreign one. I've always been in the minority wherever I've been. So my approach has been always to kind of meet people where they are. So because I've been in that place where I haven't known how things work. And so I think similar to folks here, I've tried to approach clients or anyone that I'm advising from a deep, deep place of empathy. So I don't expect them to know privacy. I don't expect them to know how the courts work. I don't expect them to know about the trauma of a lawsuit. And so that's like one really big takeaway for as all of you sort of think about your practice, is not to operate from like a place of judgment, but to operate from a place of deep empathy for whoever it is that you're advising, because they won't know, and they won't have the same level of knowledge or experience as you. I also think that my experience with growing up abroad has helped me try to have a growth mindset towards my clients and towards people generally. So even if I'm mentoring somebody or if I'm managing a team, I try to have a growth mindset towards their development, because, and sometimes I think law school, or it can seem like the practice of law can feel very linear, like you have to do things in a certain way, and you have to, again, hit a certain checklist within a certain time. And if you don't hit that checklist within a certain time, you're a failure. Life does not operate that way, and people do not operate that way. My journey, as I'm sure everyone else here too can attest, as attorneys has not been linear. So I try to approach my teams and people that I work with a growth mindset. So if someone makes a mistake, I try not to hold it against them or to be too critical, but to try to sort of help them overcome whatever lack of skill they might have, and direct them towards resources that can help empower them. And also I work with a global team at CrowdStrike, and we're all fully remote. So it's been a lot of fun to work with people and to engage with stakeholders from different cultures. My manager, or one of my managers, is in Germany, and so his English is not very good. So I have to like slow down with him a little bit and sort of meet sort of cultural nuances with him, because he'll say things in a very direct way, which I am not used to, and so I've sometimes had to extend grace for him and know that maybe when he's being very direct, he's not being critical or trying to be hurtful. While conversely, when I work with colleagues from India, we spend a lot of time not talking about business. And for folks who operate kind of in a billable hour mindset, it's really tough spending half an hour talking about your family and things that are going on and not getting to, following up on how's the deal going? Like, this is what we actually got on the call for. So I've had to kind of adapt my communication style because the person I'm talking to is from a different culture. It's been a lot of fun to kind of pull on my international background to recognize cultural nuances. It's an asset, I think, to become culturally aware of different people and how they may communicate.
So relatedly, the next question is, has your Asian identity given you a unique perspective or advantage in your legal careers so far?
I actually would just jump off what she said. I think adaptability is a really good characteristic that you can highlight. We all come from various Asian American backgrounds, and we've had to adjust how we communicate when we're around family or when we're around people. And that's a skill set that is very useful in wherever you end up in the legal field. I grew up, working hard is really important. That has really has helped me in my legal career. But, again, like making sure that's balanced by knowing when you need to stand up for yourself and advocate and do the same for others as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think jumping off the 2 points about adaptability, I think that's related to sort of the Asian value for community. It's not about me, but it's about what's best for the community. And I think, that's really helpful for Asian American attorneys. So whether you are in-house and have to think about, the different departments you're interacting with, because, I think maybe years ago, the legal department might have been sort of a standalone thing, but these days, they are considered business partners with the C-level suite. They have to be aware of what HR needs. They have to be aware of sort of what the business needs. And you have to be a really good listener. You can't just be like, here's a law, and I'm just going to bluntly, impose it on you. You have to understand, what does a business want to accomplish, and how can we do it in a way that's compliant? So I think that is really helpful. And then if you're external counsel, you also have to be listening to your client to think about, okay, here's a law, here's what they want to accomplish, and how can we make this happen? It's not just, I'm the lawyer telling you what to do, but we're really partners. And I think having that mindset of, we're in a community, we're in this together, I think that helps with the partnership. And then kind of related to that, I think Asians are really good at anticipating needs. So I remember when I was in college, I grew up in Massachusetts, so I went to college in Chicago. So I'm always flying out from O'Hare to Logan, and I would just have to say, I'm flying out to Boston today, or this weekend. And so when there'd be like 10 people saying, do you need a ride? Do you need a ride? I wouldn't even have to ask for a ride. They would just like anticipate my need. Or like you're having friends over and the Asians know to bring food to help the hostess or host. You don't have to ask, they just anticipate. And I think that's a really huge asset for Asian American attorneys. So you're an associate and you can anticipate, this is what the partner's going to want, or this is what the client's going to want. So you think 7 steps ahead, and that's going to help you shine. Or you're a partner who anticipates, this associate maybe had a hard week personally with their family, so how can I serve them? Or similarly, if you're external counsel, you anticipate what your client needs in-house counsel. Your question is, how can I make their lives easier? How can I not be the one that is giving them another annoying email or causing an issue to escalate? So you're always sort of 7 steps ahead to make the life of your client or the partner or the associate just a little bit nicer. So I think that's just huge for Asian Americans.
I'd say, again, being adaptable, and it's okay being different. I think that's what, there's value in being different. I know we live in an area, or we work in an area of precedent, but I would say, given the times, that you should be unprecedented, right? You're talking about, like, one of the products is like Ray-Ban glasses, right? Like, has anyone ever thought about, or even thought about the light and consent? This is like all new concepts, right? So, if you're just thinking about like, oh, well, we've done the same way in the past, you got to think think about it differently now because of the changing world. And it's the same thing with identity, right? Like, hey, like I was Joe. I wanted to be Joe Cyriac. I'm like, the longest time, and it took me forever to become Jobil. And I'm so proud of the fact that my name is different, right? And I'm thinking, what was I thinking? Like I was trying to fit in and just, you know what, be yourself, because there's value in being different, right? Especially now with the way the world is, how global, new technologies, it's actually cool to be different, right? So that's what I would say, you know, value yourselves, going to a phenomenal law school, there's no imposter syndrome. When you leave, you're as smart as anybody out there, right? You do your time, you work hard, and you deserve everything you put your effort into.
Ditto.
You know, I wish we had more time to go through all the questions that were prepared, but in the interest of time, I will just have one last question that I'll be asking you guys, and I'll have some of the audiences, if you guys have any questions you want to ask our speakers, maybe we'll have 2 or 3 volunteers who will be asking questions, and we will wrap up the night that way. Okay. So the last question is, the last question would be this. So if you had to give one uplifting piece of advice to our audience or to our current students here who might feel some uncertainty about their future, what would that be?
I mean, I guess my advice would be like find your community when you go out into practicing law. That could be your, if you're coming into Chicago, please join the Asian American Bar Association, Greater Chicago. We're great. As well as South Asian Bar Association.
Yes, and the South Asian Bar Association of Chicago.
Of Chicago, yes. We're great. It's nice to have people to just talk through. When you are with your colleagues at your law firm, you may have to do code switching. You might have to not be able to present your authentic self at all times. So being around other people and to be able to talk through situations that might have happened with you at work with somebody else, and finding like mentors, both older or even peer mentors, is really important. And also a side note there, there's a difference between like having a sponsor at your own workplace that hopefully you'll be able to find that somebody who will be your champion within your firm and who can sort of like explain to you what the culture is like there and help you figure out who you need to talk with, how you can show that you will be a great addition as a partner there. You need that too, but someone outside of your immediate workspace, a mentor and peer mentors, that's also important. So that would be my advice, find your community and find people that you can sort of develop a relationship and build trust with who can help guide you.
Yeah, so to give you some background on what I'm going to share. In January, I run marathons with this charity called World Vision. They're the largest provider of clean water in the world. And they had this leaders gathering in January. And it was a time of encouragement for the runners and us fundraising for clean water. But they had this last encouragement, which I thought was really encouraging that I want to share with you guys. But they basically said, the world needs you to be who you're created to be. And I think that was really powerful for us and also for me. And I want to send that word to you guys because, we're often told that maybe we don't look right, or maybe our parents don't look right or dress right, or we don't speak the right way, or we don't eat the right stuff. I don't know, whatever. And so, yeah, it can be easy to just want to be like whoever we're supposed to be. But the thing is, there's actually a lot of us. There are a lot of people who actually look like you. And especially in this globalized environment, it's not just the US with just a reach within Chicago. A lot of firms, even small firms, have a completely global reach. I'm at a boutique firm, but our reach is actually global. And that's not even counting the big firms. And so if you can be who we're created to be, that will encourage the other Asian American attorney, that will encourage the Asian American client, that will encourage the person who's not Asian American but might feel other. And then, we live in a globalized environment. I remember we got this client from Japan, and it really helped that one of our colleagues was a major in Japanese studies, and you would think, oh, what an irrelevant subject, but it was key to getting that client. And so you just don't know the value of being who you were created to be. So just don't be afraid, just be who you're meant to be. And it's not just in terms of like being Asian, but just your personality. I remember when my first job out of college, I had this one colleague tell me, Karen, you're so linear, it's so annoying. And the thing is, it's great for law school, you know, it's great for advising clients. It's clients like those bullet points, and they like that attention to detail. And then sometimes from my extended family, I get, you're so anal and you're so like detail oriented, but the clients love it, you know? And so just be who you're meant to be, you know?
I'd probably say surround yourself with good people. It is so important, you know, and sometimes it's hard to find out who those people are, right? I think, you know, your first year of law school is a good indicator of when you're all the stress, people's perceptions change, people change, attitudes change, right? You know, same thing when I was at a tech company, it was the same thing, right? When you have all the stress, you really find out who are good and bad people, right? But try to surround yourself with the good people, because when there is the up and down of life and your career, that they'll be around more often than not. And then even if they're not, they're there if you call them up and ask for help or just a suggestion, right? And so don't be like bashful about doing that.
I would say trust yourself. Like we've all kind of alluded and talked about, you are all brilliantly smart, and to some degree you're making a decision to go into a profession that's going to be something that you stay in for a long time, hopefully. So trust yourself enough to know how to get there, and trust yourself to be able to overcome whatever obstacles we've sort of addressed or alluded to. Your career is going to be really long. And this is also advice that I got when I first started my practice, and I was having difficulty with certain cases or struggling with winning over certain clients. Your career is going to be really long, and you don't know where it's going to go. So trust yourself to know what the right decision is, and don't ever forget where you came from. Don't forget the people that have supported you along the way, because it is very easy to lose yourself in this profession. It's easy to get caught up in like matters of the ego or status or running after titles or running after kind of things which are candidly arbitrary and don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. What matters at the end of the day is if you're happy enough and if you're content enough with yourself. So trust yourself to know that when you're on that path or when you're deviating from the path that you should be on.
Yeah, can I one point of that? I do agree. Your careers are so long, right? You know, you if you could deviate, I've changed my career like 4 times. So you know, if you're not interested in something, you could always switch. It's a long. Your careers are super long. I think didn't realize it as much until I started talking to you guys about how much I've been doing, right? So, but yeah, it is a long career. So you don't get stuck in a rut if you don't make partner. There's other opportunities, other things. Maybe you're even happier doing other things. So,
thank you so much for sharing all that. So this time, if you have any questions you want to ask, yes, Jonathan.
Go up there.
You can ask there. That's fine.
I'll just ask here. Thank you guys so much for coming, and I know we've all really appreciated the advice and wisdom that you've given us. A lot of your stories have touched kind of on yourselves and your relationships to yourself or to other people, and similarly how we should approach our relationships to ourselves and other people. But at the same time, that kind of feels like it's putting the fault on us for being Asian in our relationships to ourselves and with other people. So in that sense, have there ever been any times where, not necessarily a criticism of someone who maybe was doing the othering, rather than you being the other, but your relationship with someone who was doing the othering made them change, or ways that you would wish that were to happen, rather than maybe just us adapting our mindset or searching for specific mentors or searching for specific spaces where we weren't othered. Because it's not always, the onus isn't necessarily always on us being othered as others.
I can address you, or do you want to start?
No, you can.
Yeah,
you can.
no, because that I think that's a great question, because are we just continually always being adaptable, and what about the person who actually should correct themselves? So I remember one time, one thing about being in a law firm or just in any space, sometimes you have a boss that probably feels pressure, and maybe they feel pressure from a client, and sometimes they just kind of vomit on you, I remember my first day in the office, one of the partners was yelling at the senior paralegal and swearing, and I remember thinking, oh, that's gonna come around to me, and it did. And then fast forward, but I didn't say anything, I didn't say, well, that was inappropriate behavior. But then I drew my line at one point, because at one point, she threw me under the bus in front of a client. And I was really upset, because I was like, I would never do that to you. And in fact, I was in the right anyway. And so I remember, having to, this is again where it's good to have good people around you, 'cause getting a lot of support from my husband and also friends, and making sure I'm not the crazy one, right? And so I literally confronted her. And I remember still, and there's some like things to think about when you confront someone. So I'm a person of faith, so I definitely prayed, but she's taller than me. And so I walked into the office and I did not sit down, I was standing, and that body language, and I said, hey, when that happened, that was not cool, and I would never do that to you. And you know what? By God's grace, she apologized. Now that didn't mean that she didn't lose her temper again, and I did have to again confront her. And again, I like to do the standing up thing because I'm not very tall. And she was sitting down, or when she would come into my office, I would just stand up instead of remaining in a sitting position to show, yeah, okay, so what's going on here? Because it's not like, because it's about truth. It's not about like just always being adaptable. But the truth is you don't treat people that way, especially when you had the facts wrong too. It definitely was hard for me, because this person is 14 years older than me. But I think that practice of it made it easier. And it was interesting, because one of my coworkers said, because I was like a young mother at the time, she actually, and this is what really pushed me to do it, she said, Karen, think about the example you're gonna be giving to your kids. Would you want your kids pushed around like that? And that really cinched it for me. I was like, no, I don't want my kids treated like that. The mama bear came at me, so I was like, so I'll stick up for myself, because it's a way to stick up for my kids. I don't want, it's kind of like the Back to the Future. You guys are probably babies, don't know. But George McFly,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and his dad just didn't stick up for himself. And, but what if he had, and so, so I completely agree. People need to be called on the carpet, yeah.
Would you like anyone else like to do it before I jump in?
No, I'm sorry, go ahead. I would just say advocate for yourself, right? There's no better advocate than yourself for yourself. And then the other thing is, if you're the best at a specific area, it doesn't matter what color or race, right? If you are the best, right, they'll respect you, right? And if they don't, that's on them and not you, right? You have other options, you go somewhere else. It's a long career, right? So.
Yeah, I've unfortunately not had that experience of having some, like where I've tried to tactfully call somebody out, where I've had it received well. Yet, I'm always hopeful. But yeah, I think to Jobil's point, like, you can't really, this might be like a very Zen sort of belief, but like I can't really control how other people like respond to me, right? So all I can do, or all any of us can do, is control ourselves, right? And dictate ourselves and our own actions. So I think it's difficult to not, it's difficult to, we can always hope for people to respond apologetically or to recognize when they're in the wrong, but most attorneys, and I say this with a lot of respect for everybody that I've worked with, most attorneys have really big egos and they won't admit it. They won't admit when they're wrong, and so it takes a lot of grace to say, okay, well, we're just gonna have to learn through experience then, and they're gonna have to go through more difficult scenarios where good people maybe leave or don't work with them because they can't see when they were in the wrong or admit when they've made a mistake. So yeah, I'm glad that you had that experience, Karen, where your colleague was apologetic, but I have not had that experience yet.
Yeah,
I'm still
I
waiting.
feel she's a very loyal person. I appealed to her loyalty by saying, I would never do that to you, But yeah, that was definitely God's grace because not everyone, and the thing is, it's not like that first time. I had to confront again.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like,
I'll just add, one of the earliest questions was around the bamboo ceiling and how, especially with the law firms, it hasn't changed that much. We are seeing Asian Americans rise to partner, and many, hopefully soon, will rise to equity partner. But there are places like the Asian American Bar Association, South Asian Bar Association, where we are trying to work together to change the system, because it is a systemic issue that we're facing. It doesn't just continue for years and years because, it's like, oh, we couldn't, train you well enough on your soft skills. Like, there's plenty of training going on through the Bar Association. If you guys haven't been to NAPABA, the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association, they have a lot of resources and training, so we can sort of fight this stereotype that Asian Americans are hard workers but not management material, or they can't get the book of business because they don't have the right kind of skills or looks or whatever. There is something that we need to do. We need to keep raising awareness, through the Bar Association or through you individually. I've definitely included emails when I've talked with people around oh, did you know that we have this problem with have the Asian Americans having the worst ratio of associates partners? Here's a study. Why don't you read it, and then we can talk about it. Just throw it into conversations, and you don't necessarily even have to say I'm giving this to you because you are part of the problem, but maybe it's something good for you to read about and share with your colleagues, with your affinity groups. But I think there are things that you can do to try to change the system, and there are people who are doing it. More in-house counsel, general counsels who are pushing law firms to, I want to see people who, I've had direct contact with Asian Americans get ordination credit, not just the partner who's white that I've been talking with. There's a lot of push, and we just need you guys to keep doing it as you guys join the profession as well.
I think we have time for just one more question. Yes.
Hi. Also, first, thank you for proving my point, Karen, that height doesn't matter. But I think the best part of having alumni come speak is hearing their stories. And I always feel more motivated after hearing these conversations, especially stories about how our alumni would have growing pains, right? So I guess I'm asking, what are some memorable growing pains starting out as an attorney?
I have one. Yeah. And I think this is a question actually that we've been asked to think about. Maybe one of you guys had asked this, but it was a question about code switching. Do you guys have to code switch, and how do you code switch? So again, I'm East Asian, Chinese American, so definitely grew up, the whole Confucian mindset, respect the elder, right? And only speak what you're spoken to. So we had this, I was a young associate in my late 20s, and we had this client that had been with us from the beginning of time, you know. They were actually a massive client. The joke was they paid the rent with the cases they gave us. And we had such a secure relationship because the in-house counsel was actually used to work at our firm and kind of was like really good friends with the founding partner. But anyways, you know, fast forward, and it's not so much about, at least for this company, the relationship between the lawyer and the firm. It's about procurement. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of the term procurement. They're also called the bean counters. They don't really care about the relationship. It's about, we want to save a buck, you know? Who can we get to do the work for the cheapest, you know? Like going to Target or something, I don't know. And so we were called in by procurement to have a meeting, and it was going to be like a couple of the partners, a couple of procurement people, the in-house counsel, and you know, for some reason they brought me along. They thought it was a good idea to bring me along. So I was in my 20s, and everyone's like 20 years older than me in the room. Maybe the youngest might have been like just over 10. And the procurement people said something that was like just wrong. And everything in me wanted to say like, you're wrong, you're wrong. But then my Asian part was like, no, don't say it, don't say it. So I didn't say it. I did not say it. And we didn't look good. And then the taxi ride home, because there's still taxis back then. I remember telling my colleagues, the partners, like, yeah, they were wrong on there. Like, Karen, what? You did not say something? Like, why didn't you say something, Karen? Like, we look so bad. And I was like, well, and I couldn't explain to these white people, like, well, there's this thing called deference to the elder, you know, and you guys are 20 years older and no one gave me permission to speak. And yeah, they were upset, and I was upset, and I was angry at myself. And from that point, I made a promise to myself, like, Karen, you will speak up. And but it was both ways, because not only did I decide I'm going to speak up, but then they're emotionally intelligent enough, the senior partner, that in the future he would begin the meeting by saying, oh, and by the way, Karen, if you want to say something, say something. And then in the middle of the meeting, he'd say, and Karen, do you have something to say? And so fast forward, so that was hard, because I felt like this is a solid client that I brought risk to, you know, because of the fact that I didn't push back with procurement. But, you know, again, the whole growth mindset that, you know, Madhavi was talking about, you know, fast forward in terms of code switching, you know, because I guess I've had, you know, almost 20 years of practicing code switching. It's a little bit easier. And so just recently, we had this one client, and this is a C-suite level executive who didn't want to do the right thing. And the general counsel was like, no, you're going to do the right thing. He's like, no, I'm not. And I had no qualm saying, you're going to do the right thing. Of course, he did not do the right thing and disobeyed the general counsel. But the general counsel was like, we're just going to just surpass you and go over you and do the right thing. But I had no, even though the executive level guy was like, he's probably like 30 years older than me. I was like, I don't care. This is how it is. I mean, except respectfully, I didn't say I don't care, you know. But yeah, but that's 20 years later. So that's again to say, you know, themes of like your career's long, growth mindset. But that was growing pains, learning to realize the strengths my culture brings, but also the disadvantages, and learning to kind of just compartmentalize and just set that aside, you know. So
Yeah, I don't have a story from like my career so far, but getting licensed was a journey for me. And so I don't share this story a lot, but I'm telling all of you this just to give you some comfort. It all worked out. We're all lawyers now, we're all licensed, but I was not very good at taking exams. And so with all of the standardized tests, including the bar exam, I struggled. And I did not pass the Illinois bar exam my first time or my second time. I passed the third time, but getting there was a massive journey. And I realize now in hindsight that a big part of why I didn't pass the first or the second time was because I'd taken on too much. So I'm very close with my family, and all of us, so my parents live in India most of the time, and so I was living with my brother, and then my parents were also at home, and it was just a lot. So I couldn't really focus on studying for the bar pretty much that first summer after law school. So I was also working like a part-time job, and I just taken on too much. Like I thought I could do it all. and I just wasn't well prepared. I didn't finish the Barbary material because I thought I could wing it. I was like, I'm smart enough, I can do it. Couldn't do it. And so the first time I didn't pass, I was very dejected. And thankfully, I still had my law firm job. They extended a lot of grace to me. And so I was like, I'll be fine. Oh, I'll be fine. And I was a little, candidly in hindsight, I was a little arrogant and kind of full of myself. And the second time, again, I didn't fully prepare because I got pulled into work stuff and my family was still here. And I felt like I needed to be emotionally present for them and also kind of help out. Again, kind of being the good daughter and kind of meeting those standards by the way that I was raised. And also be a stellar employee and bill all the hours and carved out time for studying for the bar. So I didn't end up passing my second time either, because again, I'd taken on too much and I didn't know how to set boundaries or to tell my family, I love you, but I can't talk to you for like 4 months because I need to just prepare. I couldn't do that. So then when I didn't pass the second time, I really reflected, and I remember my brother gave me a really good pep talk, and he said, Madhavi, are you committed to being a lawyer or not? You got this whole stuff. You're always gonna have a job, you're gonna have us, but you have to be able to set boundaries. And because of, I think in large part because of the way I was raised, I didn't know how to set good boundaries with people or with my family or even with work. And so that was like a major hurdle that I needed to overcome in order to get licensed as an attorney. And so after that conversation with my brother, I felt like, okay, I need to just do the hard thing for myself, which is to just tell everybody no. Like for the next 4 months, I am disappearing. I'm not gonna do anything fun. I need to focus on this. I also realized that I didn't know how to study. I didn't have the skill set or the proper focus, I think, to pass the bar because I was overcommitted. And so I really doubled my efforts and actually worked with an attorney who'd also had the similar experience to me where he didn't pass the bar the first time because he was working part-time, and he directed me to some resources. And so I had to get really humble with myself and say, I don't know how to do this. And I ended up passing my third time. But at that point, I lost my job at the firm because they weren't very forgiving the third time. And so I had to kind of restart, but I was licensed. And so when I restarted, I started literally from the beginning. I did contract work for a while, and then I tapped into my network in Chicago and ended up getting a litigation position after that. But it was a journey. It was a 1.5 year long journey of basically coming to terms with the fact that I needed to acquire the skill of setting better boundaries and being very realistic about what I could accomplish, and being really, really focused because I was not operating well as a person or as an attorney. And so now, fast forward, everything's worked out, but that skill of boundary setting was very difficult, and it still is a challenge. So it's something that I'm continuing to work on, even now.
Okay.
Are we all taking turns, or are we at our time limit?
I think we can have.
Okay.
Go
should
for
I
it.
go next?
Go for it.
Like a particular moment in my career that had an impact with me. It's like a very small moment, but it like shaped how I saw myself in the legal profession. So I've been working, the last several years in development in nonprofit legal aid, and there was an event that I helped organize. And I was there taking people's pictures, and Christy Ganoan, I'll just name her because she's one of my heroes. I was taking her picture with her group, and then she looked at me. It's like, why are you taking the picture? I want you to be in the picture. So I was in with this group of people of prominent people in the legal community, and I was in the picture with her, and then she introduced me to the people in the crowd. And Sorry, I don't know why I'm getting emotional.
She was taking
Yes,
you were
yes.
taking her
So
picture.
I
yeah.
felt seen in a way that I wasn't. And that really sort of helped me believe more in what I can do. So, and then from there, she was sort of a champion with me as I grew in the Asian American Bar Association. And where there was that huge rise in hate against Asian Americans, and we needed to take action, like her and others, Gary Zhao, who was the president at the time, and we were talking about what can we do. We can't let this happen to our community. We wrote a letter to the Attorney General's office, the Cook County State's Attorney's office, and it was really great that we really came together as a community to really advocate for our community. And then, they trusted me to draft the letter. And having people who are your cheerleaders and champions and finding them is really important. And we've been able to accomplish a lot through the Asian American Bar Association because there were people who believed in me, and then I trusted them as well as to sort of lead our group. So I guess having that one quick moment that really, in a strange way, changed how I perceive myself. And I hope that you'll be able to find people like that who will see something more of you than you might see in yourself.
I'll briefly, because us lawyers like to talk. I think, we live in a very busy society. We live in a busy career, and you're like constantly doing work, billing, et cetera, right? But take the time to self-assess yourself, right? Can you do something a little different, right? Be critical of yourself in a positive way. And can I do something different, right? Can I write a brief a little differently? Can I make an argument a little differently? I've had a couple occasions where, wasn't doing good as a litigator. I called my mom, I suck at this. And then I'm like, what can I do? Let me reassess it. I'm like, okay, you know what? I talked to my friend. It's like, you know what? You're making 20 arguments, just do 3. Give me your fastballs. Carried that to this day, right? So, in your personal life, with a very busy schedule, self-assess. Hey, where am I doing with my family? Where am I doing with my kids? That's the only thing that I would recommend, to just take a pause, right? Reflect, self-assess, whether that's work, whether that's your personal life, whether that's, other things going on in your life. And if you make a conscious effort, I'm sure that you'll find things you could do better.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. On behalf of the organization, I really want to thank you all so much for your time and for all the incredible insights and inspiring stories that you guys shared with us tonight. So why don't we give them a big round of applause? And as a small token of our appreciation, we have prepared some gifts for our speakers. So Tessa, if you...
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's the end of the night. Have a safe trip back. There's a watch party going on right now in the Commons, so if you would like to make a short visit, feel free to do so. And there are other events tomorrow also, so I would love to see you all there. And all the speakers will be there as well tomorrow. So
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
Please introduce yourselves on LinkedIn or email. Anything you guys need, anything in my network, career advice, put you in touch with anyone in my network, please do. I'm sure it goes for all of us. Just introduce yourself. Hey, more than willing to help. Okay.
Yeah, same
Definitely.
if anyone's in Chicago, especially, I think we're all in Chicago.
Yeah.
So let us know, hit us up. We'd love
Right.
to get coffee and share more.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.